From Columbus, the center of Ohio, this is music from the heartland with songs at the center. This Masters Series episode features multi-Grammy Award-winning guitar virtuoso Albert Lee. And from the pop duo Peter and Gordon, two-time Grammy Award-winning Producer of the Year, Peter Asher. Major funding provided by The Ohio State University, James Cancer Hospital, and Solove Research Institute. No two people are exactly alike, and neither are their cancers. At the James, we believe there is no routine cancer. Learn more at cancer.osu.edu/cancer. Additional funding provided by the Academy of Country Music Lifting Lives Program, the Ohio Arts Council, and France & Associates.
Hi, welcome to Songs at the Center. I'm Eric Gnezda. From time to time, when we have the good fortune of interviewing the very elite in the songwriting industry, we call them a master series. Well, in this particular episode, we'd be better off to call it a legend series, as we welcome Peter Asher and Albert Lee.
Thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. I'm kind of tempted to just kind of let you guys talk and sit back and listen to it. There's so many stories, and I know you're touring it right now with a show in which you reminisce and play some of the hits that you've both been involved in and all that. So you have great stories and, of course, great music. The thing that strikes me the most about both of you together is that both of you, at a very, very important time, really experienced and saw and participated in the British invasion from both sides of the Atlantic. As it was kind of gelling and coming up in England and then exploded over here. And I'd like each of you to talk to us a little bit about how that happened and how exciting that was, what it was like for you.
It was, I mean, I was very lucky in that we got to be part of the early sort of wave of the British invasion. I mean, the whole thing you have to remember about the British invasion, of course, is about 90% the Beatles and 10% all the rest was put together. I mean, without the Beatles, it would never have happened. They're the ones who were just so good that they broke the barrier, you know, because up till then, British records were not hits in America, ever. British bands never made it in America. I mean, if they did, it was some weird exception, like Lonnie Donegan would have one hit, or Acker Bilk would have one hit or something. But until the Beatles, it didn't really count. And the other thing to keep in mind is that it all stemmed from our admiration for America and for its music. I mean, all of us who were considered part of the British invasion began as tribute bands to American music. You know, we were all gobbling up every American record we could find and learning all these tunes, and there were R&B bands and rock bands, and of course we all had skiffle groups because we were in love with American folk music. So it all stemmed. I mean, it was your music. The miracle of the British invasion is that we all kind of learned it, polished it up a bit, and sold it back to you, which is kind of an amazing success story.
Yeah, and John Lennon talked about his influence from Elvis, but for both of you, it was the Everly Brothers.
In many respects, it was. I mean, we when Albert and I talk about such things, we find certainly that's one of the things we have in common. Yeah. And of course, in the show, we're able to talk about the Everlys from my perspective, which is as a fan. You know, Gordon and I would go and see them every chance we got, and I didn't meet them till many decades later. Whereas Albert got to know them quite early on and has all kinds of great stories about being on the road with the Everlys and so on.
Yeah, later in your life, you got to be their musical director. I bet that was...
Well, yeah, I was on the road with them for 26 years.
Wow.
And before that, I was working with Don when he was solo. So a long association with those guys, back to 62, really.
And you were influenced by American music in other ways, and that you really got involved in R&B and country, even.
That's right,
played with
yeah.
a lot of the great country acts.
Yeah, well, over the years I have, yeah. And I didn't get to America until 70. You know, I was a little late. I was very envious of all the guys that were coming over here and having success, you know, but I eventually got over here, and it all happened to me in a very short space of time. You know, I was bringing rock and roll and country back to the Americans, you know, from my version of it.
Yeah.
Well, when Vince Gill says you're one of the finest guitar players in the world, and
Vince is not too shabby.
No, he's not. And then Eric Clapton says you're the ultimate virtuoso. That's got to be quite a compliment.
Oh, well, it's nice.
And we're honored that you're with us.
No, it's my pleasure.
You know, I was always been struck by, and I don't know if it's a myth, I'm sure there's some truth to it, but George Martin, in his thought process, and one of the things that I had heard that kind of convinced him to sign the Beatles was that they had a sense of humor.
I think so. I think that's definitely true, because we know George had a good ear for humor himself. I mean, let's not forget it works the other way around too, because one of the reasons the Beatles wanted to work with George Martin was because he had produced Peter Sellers and Spike Milligan and all our comic heroes. It wasn't the records he'd made, the musical records he'd made. It was the comedy records he'd made that impressed them so much. We all knew George Martin must be cool if he'd worked with Peter Sellers, and indeed he was cool.
Well, as I said, we could talk forever. We could talk for hours here. We'd also love to hear some music. Is there a song you'd want to kick us off?
Well, we thought,
with?
I mean, in keeping with the discussion we just had, we thought as a new aspiring young duo of like ourselves, it would be appropriate for us to pay tribute to the duo we admired. I mean, this is the Everly Brothers, of course, who Gordon and I went to see every chance we get, and ended up accounting for a big chunk of Albert's amazing career. So this is one of our favorite Everly's tunes.
Bye-bye love, bye-bye happiness, hello loneliness, I think I'm gonna cry. Bye-bye love, bye-bye sweet caress, hello emptiness, I feel like I could die. Bye-bye my love, goodbye. There goes my baby with someone new. She sure looks happy, I sure am blue. She was my baby till he stepped in. Goodbye to romance that might have been. Bye-bye love, bye-bye happiness, hello loneliness, I think I'm gonna cry. Bye-bye love, bye-bye sweet caress, hello emptiness, feel like I could die. Bye-bye my love, goodbye. I'm through with romance, I'm through with love, I'm through with counting the stars above. And here's the reason that I'm so free. My loving baby is through with me. Bye-bye love, bye-bye happiness, hello loneliness, I think I'm gonna cry. Bye-bye love, bye-bye sweet caress, hello emptiness, feel like I could die. Bye-bye my love, goodbye. Bye-bye my love, goodbye. Bye-bye my love, goodbye.
Peter, you've done so many things in the music business, everything you can imagine, and you recently worked on Steve Martin's Bright Star on Broadway, which was nominated for 5 Tonys.
It was indeed. Yes, well, I mean, I did a couple of albums with Steve Martin and Edie Brickell, which we also got a Grammy for one of those, and after the 2 albums, between the first and second, actually, we had a number of conversations where Steve and Edie both thought it could conceivably turn into a Broadway-type show using those songs. Now, in reality, the way it ended up was that we only kept 2 songs off the album, and actually they wrote a lot of new songs once the musical assumed a life of its own. We did several years of work on that, doing tryouts and table readings and out-of-town things, and eventually it came to Broadway, where it did okay. It wasn't a huge hit. It ran 100 and some shows. But it's now opening in L.A. At the Armstrong Theater in October of this year. So I'm in the process now of putting the band together for I don't suppose you want a Broadway gig, but we're putting the house band together for the LA version of the show.
And you also produced Robin Williams' 2002 album.
I did.
Live album, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the Grammys I certainly never expected to win was Comedy Album of the Year, which thanks to Robin I did. We did. Robin was a dear friend of mine. We were very close friends, and he asked me to help when he was doing this album. So I went out on the road with him for about 3 weeks. And essentially, it consisted of choosing all the best bits, making notes every night, choosing the best bits, working with Robin on what worked and what didn't work and stuff, with Robin and his manager David Steinberg. So it's not kind of different than producing a musical album. Obviously, a lot of choosing involved, and because Robin doesn't have the patience to listen to it all back and stuff, he relied on me to do that because he's brilliant every night, and every night's different. So I had to make some artistic choices. But working with him, of course, was exciting. He's such a genius. I mean, he's one of the most brilliant people I ever knew. So. And I miss him very dearly, but working with him was a pleasure.
We'd love to hear another song. You want to do one for us? What?
Well, we thought we'd do one maybe from a different era,
Okay.
just because our show tries to cover various eras. And this is one that Ed Albert had been doing on his own without actually being aware of its origin. I tell the story in the show, so I won't go into all the details. But it's a song that some of you will recognize as being from a major band and a major selling album. But actually, at the time Albert learned it, he just fell in love with the song and didn't know who'd written it at all. But I loved his version of it when I heard it online and suggested that we work it out and put it in our show. So we did.
Another turning point, the fork stuck in the road. Time grabbed you by the wrist, direct you where to go. Don't make the best of this test and don't ask why. Not a question, but a lesson learned in time. Something unpredictable, in the end it's right. Hope you have the time of your life. Take the photographs and still frames in your mind. Hang it on a shelf for good health and good time. Tattoos and memories and dead skin on trial. Go for what it's worth it all the while. Something unpredictable, in the end it's right. Hope you have the time of your life. Something unpredictable, in the end it's right. Hope you have the time of your life. Another turning point, fork stuck in the road. Time grabbed you by the wrist, direct you where to go. So make the best of this test and don't ask why. Not a question, but a lesson learned in time. Something unpredictable, in the end it's right. Hope you have the time of your life. Something unpredictable, in the end it's right. Hope you have the time of your life.
And that was, of course, a Green Day song originally, as you probably noticed.
Absolutely.
but then it became sort of country-ish, and I love it that way.
Well, Albert, you got into the music business as a instrumentalist and then wound up writing and with a record deal and all that. How was that adjustment?
Well, it was slow. I was always someone's lead guitar player, you know.
Yeah.
And when I did eventually get record deals, I was singing really for the first time. So each record I made was an experiment, you know, with my vocals, and it was years later that my voice began to mature and become something. But my first 2 or 3 records were, you know, they were okay, but I sing a lot better now than I did when I began.
And you toured with so many wonderful people, Joe Cocker, Clapton, just name them, and you've been with them.
Yeah.
But it was in an energetic time in the 70s, and when rock and roll was still being invented, if you will. And can you describe what that energy was like?
Well, it was pretty wild going on the road. I know Peter has some experiences when he toured in the early 60s, but
yeah.
By the time the 70s came around, it was really wild. You know, all the English bands were coming over, and
it's crazy.
It was pretty crazy, but it was great fun.
Well, Peter, after Peter and Gordon, you did some A&R work for Apple. Yeah. And you were the one who signed James Taylor.
I was lucky enough to kind of, discover in the showbiz vernacular James Taylor, yes.
Yeah.
He sort of came to me in a way. We met in London, oddly enough, through a big confluence of circumstances, and just called me up out of the blue and came over to my house and played me a few songs, and I was knocked out. I was completely overwhelmed by every aspect. I mean, one of the questions I often get is, what was it about James that was so special? And the answer is everything, if you think about it. I mean, his guitar picking was wholly original. It was kind of semi-classical, but with like jazz chords in it somewhere, and his singing voice was beautiful and sounded folky, but then he was stealing licks from Sam Cooke and Ray Charles. You know, it was a whole new thing. And then he wrote all these incredible songs. So right there on the spot, I said, look, I've just got this new job. I'm head of A&R for Apple Records. I can sign people. Would you like a record deal? And he kind of went, yes, please, I would. And that was it. And then I had to explain to him, of course, whose label it was, and took him in the office a couple of days later to introduce him to the Beatles and sign him up. He was the first artist signed to Apple. And then when Apple kind of fell apart a bit, we took him off Apple, and that's when I became his manager and producer for the next 30 years, I think, thereabouts.
Well, you sure did the world a favor. That's one of the many favors you've done the world. He did me a favor
too, but yes, it was fun. And James remains, a dear friend and one of my favorite singers.
Yeah, and then you produced Linda Ronstadt, among many, many other people. But I want to ask you a little bit about producing. Yeah. As a producer, how do you get a sense of what's appropriate for a given song? Because it's easy to just pile on tracks and all that kind of stuff. But what's your approach?
Well, you work on it with the artist. I mean, production is an interesting mixture, because some of it is to help the artist get what they want, but some of it is also to guide the artist into what would be the best possible result that will make the record beautiful and ideally make other people like it as well. And so you kind of mix those two up. And production is an interesting role because some of it's psychological. You want to have the right mood in the studio. You want everybody to be happy, but also have them aiming in the right direction. So it's kind of like directing a movie. It involves so many different aspects. I spend a lot of time before I go in the studio. I'm a great believer in kind of pre-production, whether it's sitting with the artist and the song, working out the best way to do it, picking the best musicians, kind of like casting a film, getting the right engineer, like your right cinematographer. And so, and if you get all that right, occasionally, if you get lucky, you can come out with a great record. But there are a lot of different aspects to it, and the thing is to try and coordinate them all in advance, so that by the time you actually start going in the studio, particularly now when budgets are more minimalist than ever, and you end up doing a lot of it in people's little home rooms and stuff, you just take the time to try and get everything right and hope for the best.
You were, if I'm not mistaken, the first person here. I want to hold your hand.
I was. Yes.
Tell me about that. That's a great story.
It's a good story. Paul. A series of circumstances led to Paul McCartney and I sharing the top floor of our family home in London, because he'd been going with my sister. He was around all the time. And there was a little basement room, music room, that my mother had to use occasionally. She was a classical musician. She was an oboe professor at the Royal Academy of Music. And she told Paul he could use this little music room. And one day John Lennon came over, and the two of them were down there for a couple of hours. And after they'd finished this song, they called upstairs, and I was in my bedroom, invited me down to come sit there and hear this song they'd just finished. So yeah, they sat side by side on the piano bench, no guitars, interestingly. Though you think of it now as a guitar song, but it wasn't initially. And they played me this brand new song called I Want to Hold Your Hand, and asked me what I thought. Yeah. So yeah, it's one of those things where you realize, even at the time, you kind of go, this is pretty cool. And then looking back on it, you go, yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah. And Paul McCartney felt that a song that he'd written, World Without Love, wasn't really right for the Beatles, right? And
I'm not sure if he did or if John did. Collectively, certainly, the Beatles said Paul had written the two verses and no bridge. And it got abandoned. The Beatles abandoned it. It was kind of an orphan song. And so when Gordon and I got signed up and had a record deal in place, I said to Paul, if that song's not going anywhere, can we have it? And he said, yes, you can have it.
Great.
And that's the song, of course, that changed my life forever, because it went to number one all over the place. And I, at the time I was a philosophy student at London University, but by the time, 6 months had gone by, I was a giant pop star instead, which was far more fun.
Well,
Not that I don't love philosophy, but being chased by teenage girls beats philosophy every time.
Well, Albert and Peter, would you play us another song?
Absolutely.
What do you got?
Yeah, we thought. Since you mentioned it, we would end with our version of World Without Love.
That'd be great.
This is the song, as I say, that for me was a major turning point. It went to number one in England, then number one all over Europe, number one in America. And the biggest part of that news, same when the Beatles got the phone call 6 months earlier that I Want to Hold Your Hand was number one. All that was incredibly exciting, but what it meant was we would get to go to America. And we longed to do that. America was the land of our dreams. All the great movies came out from America. All the great music we loved came from America. We knew exactly which cities we wanted to visit and everything. So we were thrilled. And indeed, once it was number one, they said, now you've got to come over and do Ed Sullivan and do this and do that. And we were off and running. So this is the song that changed my life all those years ago. 1, 2, 3, 4. Please lock me away and don't allow the day here inside where I hide with my loneliness. I don't care what they say, I won't stay in a world without love. Birds sing out of tune and rain clouds hide the moon. I'm okay, here I'll stay with my loneliness. I don't care what they say, I won't stay in a world without love. So I wait, and in a while I will see my true love smile. She may come, I know not when. When she does, I'll know. So baby, until then, lock me away and don't allow the day here inside where I hide with my loneliness. I don't care what they say, I won't stay in a world without love. So I wait, and in a while I will see my true love smile. She may come, I know not when. When she does, I'll know. So baby, until then, lock me away and don't allow the day here inside where I hide with my loneliness. I don't care what they say, I won't stay in a world without love. I don't care what they say, I won't stay in a world without love.
Well, Peter Asher and Albert Lee, it's just been an honor for us and our audience that you spent some time with us.
It's been a pleasure. No, this was great.
Thank you so much.
Best of luck to you with your continued tour, and we hope to see you back on the show sometime. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us on this Masters edition of Songs at the Center. I'm Eric Gnezda, and we hope that you'll come to Ohio sometime where you'll always find Songs at the Center. We'll see you next time.
Major funding provided by The Ohio State University, James Cancer Hospital, and Solove Research Institute. No two people are exactly alike, and neither are their cancers. At the James, we believe there is no routine cancer. Learn more at cancer.osu.edu/cancer. Additional funding provided by the Academy of Country Music Lifting Lives Program, the Ohio Arts Council, and Friends and Associates. Learn more about Songs at the Center at songsatthecenter.tv.